Hey there, and welcome to my sixth installment of Let's Code. So what we did last time was we got socket.io connected up and listening to connections and reporting anytime a connection happens, and then we took our bootstrap code from our jade file and moved it into its own file. So that way it's a lot easier to work on. We don't have to do it inside of a jade file. We can do it inside of a JS file. It just makes it funner for development, I guess. What we're going to do this time is we're going to get the socket.io implementation to let us or inform us anytime that a user disconnects. And then from there, we're going to clean up all of our server code and move it into its own file. All of our socket.io code, move it into its own file, kind of like what we did for the server and for browser sync. Then after that, we need to address a concern inside of our jade file. We have some application domain leakage that's happening that we need to address. And in the process of addressing that, we're going to talk about a library that's near and dear to my heart called Mithril. So with our goals in mind, let's code. Okay, so the next bit we're going to get in is we're going to hook up this disconnect function here, or this disconnect event handler. So it looks like the socket can take a disconnect event and respond to that. So we're going to get that in there real quick. So before we do that, let's create a branch. We'll call this more socket -io. All right, we got that going, and we will go ahead and npm start this so we can work on it. So we have our browser sync bit here, and we will jump into index. So we have this IO stuff here. We should just be able to, in here, do socket.on, and I think it was the disconnect event, on disconnect. We want to execute this function, and I don't know what parameters it takes. It takes no parameters. I'm curious what it passes. Anyway, so here we'll just console.log evil has left. Bang. Let's have a party. So now we'll refresh that, come over here, and we will get this going. So we have evil into house now. Yep, evil has left, and then evil into house when we connect again. So this is doing pretty darn good. Let's go ahead and we can now do a quick commit on this. So we'll do GST, we have that. Let's do a GD, and we will do git commit all, add disconnect event handler for sockets. Okay, so now we have that committed and we're good to go. All right, now this is looking pretty darn ugly here. We have all of this stuff in the index file, and we don't really need that there. It would make sense for this to actually be in its own file. So let's go ahead and make that a thing. So we'll go ahead under server, we'll add sockets.js, and here we're going to do, well, before, let's not jump ahead of ourselves here. So let's open up sockets.js, and we will go ahead and move this stuff out of here. Actually, let's move it out completely. And it looks like the only outside dependency that we have is this server. So we can kind of do the same thing that we did with browser sync. So we'll just do a module.exports, and this will be a function that takes our outside dependency, which in this case is server. So we'll go here and we'll put in server. Alrighty. So that needs to go or be passed in there. So let's go down here, and actually here, let's set this to socket.io, and then we will go ahead and remove this. Alright, so now we have socket.io there. So now we can do var io is equal to socket.io, and this will pass in the server. Good. So now we can move this in here. Alrighty, and that looks pretty darn good. Let's just make sure this is still working the way we expect it to. Actually, one thing we need to do here is call this. So we're going to call this start sockets. Bam. We'll go back, do some of this, and line that up beautifully. And then here we will go sockets. Okay, so that should bring sockets in. Now we need to do start sockets. So let's just go here. Oops. Let's just go here. And we'll pass in server. Okay, so now that should work. Everything's saved up. Oh, we got a connection. Evil into house. And evil has left and evil into house. So that looks pretty darn good. Although this method is kind of, or this function is kind of ugly to me. So let's move some of this out. This should just be a function that sets everything up that's available in this space. So let's have a function called connect. And this will take an IO object. Yeah, so this will take an IO object. Now we can move this out into here. And that looks pretty good. So that will do IO on. We can pass that in. And what are we going to do here? So here, we don't need to var or do anything. We can just do connect and one of those. And that should do it. So we pass in the server to socket.io, which returns an IO object, which gets passed into this function, and we use that parameter to add it. All right, that looks a lot better. All right, let's take a look at that. Any errors? Evil into house, and we'll refresh, and we have evil has left and evil into house. So that is working just the way that we thought it would. So let's give this a good GD. This is nice. So we, let's see here. All right, we removed a lot of lines and we added 4. So that's really good. That looks beautiful. And we put all of the complexity inside of this own, or all the stuff pertaining to the sockets inside of its own little contained file there. Okay, so I think we are good. So now let us do a commit. So let's gst, we will git add everything. All right, we have everything added, and we'll git commit all, and we will go lipstick on socket IO backend. All right, so let's look at our git log. Okay, we have our lipstick on our socket.io backend, and we have that add disconnect. Everything else, like from that bootstrap JavaScript and all that, comes from our master. So on this branch, we have these 2 commits. So we are looking pretty darn good. So before we get started on the integration on the client side for the socket.io bits, one of the things we need to address is moving these elements from the index page into our application domain. So our application domain starts in this app.js file. Everything included in here, everything imported, everything from this point back is considered our application domain. So in here in render app, this seems like a very good place to take care of all that. Well, because this is in JavaScript, that leaves us with pretty much 2 options. We either use a framework or we don't use a framework for managing these DOM elements. Now, not using a framework, we could just do vanilla JS and use document.createElement and then create these elements, get them all bound up, get their properties set, compose them in a parent-child fashion in the layout that we need, and then insert in the DOM, and then manage those. By the time we get all of that code dried up and cleaned up and moved around, we're pretty much going to be left with a micro framework anyway. So not only will we have to deal with our application code, we're also going to have to manage a framework. Now, we could include jQuery into this to make that framework management a lot easier, but the issue with that is jQuery is going to add about 96 kilobytes minimized to our build bundle, our finalized build bundle after it's minimized, and we don't really use a lot of it in this case, a lot of the features. So we're pretty much bringing in a crap ton of cruft that we're not even going to be using. So I wouldn't really want to use jQuery for that, but we still even have to manage the framework and maintain it, and that's not something I want to do, not in this application. What I would like to do is actually use a framework. So we'll let the framework be the framework, and then I'll just build my application on top of that. So when I'm looking for a framework for something like this, I want something really small, a very easy, small API, something that's not very opinionated, and basically something that's fast. So because there's not a lot of interactions here or things like that, we're not really going to use a lot of utilities. So I tend to go for things like Mithril here. So Mithril is very lightweight, it's very fast, it's very easy to use once you get used to the pattern. It's a very easy to use single page app library. It does pretty much what we need to do. We need to have the ability to create HTML elements, render them out, manage them in some way, hook up to events, fire events off, change values based on event changes. Everything that we need, this does, and that's pretty much most of what it does. It doesn't really do too many things outside of that. One of the things that's neat about it, though, is it is very unopinionated about your application structure. So anything behind this controller view, anything behind that, you can set up however you need it to be set up, and it's not going to complain or have issues integrating. It's very, very nice, easy to use. The other neat thing about it is it uses this functional composition to describe its view. Because of this, that follows the same sort of flow that React uses. So because of that, it lends things like this get created to where you can use JSX to render down into Mithril code. So with this, we can now include MSX, define our view in this familiar structure, and because we're using Babel, there's actually a plugin for this. Someone put out a plugin that integrates well with Babel. I've used it. It's pretty good, pretty nice. It works very well. So we'll be able to integrate those things. And it's, again, very lightweight, and I believe a really good choice for pretty much most anything if you want to move quickly on it. So let's get Mithril installed for the front end, and we will install the Babel plugin for the back end. So let's get these installed. We'll first bring in Mithril, so npm I Mithril, and we're going to save this just to our normal dependencies because it's going to be included in our final build pack. And let's do an npm install, and we'll do Babel plugin JSX, and we are going to save that to dev as that is part of the build system. So once this installs, we need to hook up the Babel plugin so that way the JSX is responding to it, and we'll do that in the package JSON because we are able to add attributes or configuration to Babel inside of our package JSON. It's a neat little feature they have. So from there, we'll just put a Babel entry in. And we need this to take plugins, and this is an array that it accepts, and we will just put in Babel plugin mjsx, and that should load on build. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and give this npm start, and we'll take a look at what we have. So while that's building though, one of the things that we want to address before we move this over is we have all these additional utility classes in here. We're now going to have to specify all of this stuff in JS and JavaScript. So it makes sense to move the styling stuff into actual style sheets. So we're going to adjust that. So let's just get this going so we have something to compare to. So the first one we want to take care of is this entry. Because log doesn't have any utility classes on it right now. This has row, this has call, that has deca. So we want to move those into their actual components. So here under entry, we'll go ahead and move this up there. We will put row. And that's what's needed there is row. So here we can take row out. We will do that. And here for the input, we will add deca and call. So let's do deca, and we'll do .call. So now the only thing that we have is one class that defines it. And we moved all of that stuff out of the HTML and put it into our style sheets. And it looks like, let's give this a quick inspect here. It looks like we only have entry coming in there, and it has all of the stuff inside of entry. Same thing with entry input. So good. We are good to go there. Now we can start moving this stuff. Now that that's done, let's go ahead and we'll start here in app. We want to create a structure or a component for rendering all this out. So let's go ahead and make a folder called components. And then in components, we'll add app layout.js. And let's head into app layout.js. So in here, we're going to need to import m from Mithril. And that will bring Mithril in because we're going to need that M symbol for rendering the JSX that gets provided. We want to actually provide the object that we need, so we will do export default, and that is going to be app layout. So we need to define app layout now. So we'll do var app layout is equal to, and we'll just make this a POJO, just a plain old JavaScript object. It needs to have a view always, a view function that returns the view, but it also takes an optional controller as well, which is pretty cool. So for app layout, for this view, we will go ahead and specify this structure. So first thing we need, with JSX, you need to have something that you can't have multiple components. It needs to be a one node. You can't put like UL and form like we have here. So what we're going to do is we'll just create one div for now. We'll maybe give it a name later or a class or something like that, but it's not going to hurt us to just have an empty div as a container. And then here we'll just do UL class name, and class name is equal to log in this case. So this is an empty element right now. So we'll just keep it like that. And then we don't really need to do the form submission anymore, so we'll just do another div with a class name of entry. Okay. And we don't need to worry about the action anymore or anything like that. Okay, so that's going to contain inside of it an input. So we'll have an input that has a class name of entry input. And it also has autocomplete equals off. Okay, and actually I don't like how this kind of runs over like that, so we'll go ahead and clean this up just a little bit. All Alrighty, and head to the end. Alright, so now we can have it like that. Then after that we just need a button with a type, since we're not in a form anymore, of button, and class name is equal to entry send. Okay, and we want that to say send and button. Okay, so now we have that defined. This view will return that, and yeah, that looks pretty darn good. So we'll give this a save. It's not brought into anything yet, but I think we have a good structure. So we'll go ahead and just remove this. Okay, now with that removed, we should only have a body. And yep, see, we have nothing here anymore. So now we need to render this element. So to do that, we will just jump into here for our app.js, and we are going to import mount from, and we're going to take that from Mithril, because that's all we really need is that mount function for this. So in here, we're going to do a mount, and we'll use the container as the, oops, we'll use the container as the element that we're rendering into, and we want to put app layout. Okay, so we don't have anything named app layout right now, so that's going to be a big error. Oh, see, app layout is not defined. So what we need to do now is bring that in. So we'll import app layout from, and this will be components, components, and this will be app layout. Okay, so now we should have app layout in the mix. Let's give this a check. Okay, so now we have it. It actually mounted and rendered. We see that we have an issue here. There's probably a class name that's wrong with this button, and entry is misspelled. So we just need to go in here and change entry to what it should be, entry. We'll give that a save. And it re-renders and everything is back to normal. So now we have everything in there, except now it's not being provided by that HTML. It's actually being provided by our Mithril app. Okay, so now it would be really, really nice if we could componentize all of this. Like we could have a log component and an entry component, so we can kind of separate this so we're not dealing with everything in one big view here. So that is what we'll do next. So the last thing we need to do for this segment, now that we got everything mounted, is go ahead and move these into their own separate components as well. So since we, in our components file, we pretty much have something for entry and log in our less files, that seems like great names for these. So we will do log.js, and we'll go ahead just to keep things fun. We'll just copy this out and change this to log, and change this to log, and then we'll head up here, and the only thing we want to return from this is just that UL. Okay, so now we have that UL. That's what we want to bring back with the class name of log anytime log's called in. So here we'll do import, and we'll do log from, and we'll do log. Okay, so now we can get rid of this here, and that's, really only one line, but we can do log there. Okay, give that a save, give this a save. Actually, let's remove this, then we'll give that a save. Okay, everything's built out. Now we check here, and there is our UL still going in. So that's good. Okay, so we'll do the same sort of thing again. We'll go here, and we're going to go ahead and make another file called entry.js. Give this a little splitty poo, paste on that, get rid of this, get rid of this, and we will call this entry. And for this view, we can get rid of this and this, and of course this, and then the rest of this we will keep as our entry. Okay, that looks pretty darn good. Now we have entry there. We need to pass entry, and we should be able to have that now. So here we will do entry, and we will bring that in from entry. Okay, give that a save. Hopefully there's no errors. Nope, nothing there. And down here, we will just get rid of this, and we will put entry, and that will render the entry component. So, hopefully no errors. We come to here, and browser sync is reloaded. We now have our entry bits there just to prove it's working. We'll go ahead and close that out. It reloads and our entry is not there. So we have that effectively refactored. So with that now looking good, or looking better, everything moved into everything on the client side pretty much in our application domain at this point. What we need so far. It looks like we are ready to commit this bad boy. So let's go ahead and we'll just do a quick GST and a GD on this just to make sure everything's fine. And it looks like we brought in that Babel plugin. We added Mithril, added that. Okay, and all right, that looks pretty darn good. This is what we would expect. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll git add everything. We should get a pretty sizable commit here. Yeah. So we'll now git commit all, and we will call this add Mithril to the party. And we'll throw it to duh in there. Okay. All right, so now we have that. We got everything working, everything's committed. Now it's time to move on and implement the socket.io client-side stuff. Well, that's going to do it for this segment. Be sure to come back next time, though. We'll be working more on the client side to give the ability to send messages up to the server, and we'll address another application domain concern that's going to arise from that implementation. So it should be a pretty good time. So if you want to stay up to date with all the latest videos, be sure to hit subscribe. If you want to comment, like, do anything like that, your feedback is greatly appreciated. So, as always, keep in mind, if you find yourself bored in life, chances are you probably aren't doing it right.